Continuing where I left off, Chapter 8. War was raging and coming close to the Russian border. Everywhere one heard Bonaparte anathematized as the enemy of the human race. Recruits and reserves were being mustered in the villages, and from the theater of war came contradictory reports, false as usual, and therefore variously interpreted. The lives of old Prince Bolkowski, Prince Andrei, and Princess Marya had changed greatly since 1805. In 1806, the old prince was made one of the 8 commanders-in-chief appointed at that time for the militia throughout all Russia. Despite the infirmity of age, which had become particularly noticeable during the time when he believed his son to have been killed, the old prince did not think he had a right to refuse a duty to which he had been appointed by the sovereign himself, and this new field of activity stimulated and invigorated him. He was continually traveling through the 3 provinces entrusted to him. He was punctilious in the performance of his duties, severe to the point of cruelty with his subordinates, and went into everything down to the minutest details himself. Princess Marya had ceased taking lessons in mathematics from her father, and on mornings when he was at home only went to his study accompanied by the wet nurse and little Prince Nikolai, as his grandfather called him. The baby lived with his wet nurse and Nurse Savishna in the late princess's apartments, and Princess Marya spent most of the day in the nursery, taking the place of a mother to her little nephew as best she could. Mademoiselle Bourienne, too, appeared to be passionately fond of the child, and Princess Marya often deprived herself to give her friend the pleasure of dandling the little Ange, as she called her nephew, and playing with him. Near the altar of the church at Bald Hills, a chapel had been erected over the tomb of the little princess, and in this chapel was a marble monument brought from Italy representing an angel with outspread wings, ready to fly up to heaven. The angel's upper lip was slightly raised, as if were about to smile, and one day as Prince Andrei and Prince Marya were coming out of the chapel, they confessed to each other that the angel's face reminded them strangely of the little princess. But what was still stranger, though of this Prince Andrei said nothing to his sister, was that in the expression the sculptor had chanced to give the angel's face, Prince Andrei read the same gentle reproach he had read on the face of his dead wife. "Ah, why have you done this to me?" Soon after Prince Andrei's return, the old prince made over to him part of his property, giving him Boguchavro, a large estate about 40 versts from Bald Hills, partly because of the painful memories associated with Bald Hills, partly because he did not always feel equal to bearing with his father's temperament, and partly because he needed solitude. Prince Andrei made use of Boguchavro, started building, and spent most of his time there. After the Austerlitz campaign, Prince Andrei had firmly resolved never to go back into military service. When war broke out again, and everyone had to serve, he took a post under his father in recruitment in order to avoid active service. The old prince and his son seemed to have exchanged roles after the campaign of 1805. The father, stimulated by his activity, expected the best results from the new campaign, while Prince Andrei, on the contrary, taking no part in the war and secretly regretting his inactivity, saw only the dark side. On the 26th of February, 1807, the old prince set off on one of his circuits. Prince Andrei, as always during his father's absence, was staying at Bald Hills. Little Nikolai had not been well for the last 3 or 4 days. The coachman who had driven the old prince to town returned bringing documents and letters for Prince Andrei. Not finding the young prince in his study, The valet took the letters to Princess Maria's apartments, but he was not there either. The valet was told that the prince had gone to the nursery. "If you please, Your Excellency, Petrushka has brought some papers," said one of the nursemaids to Prince Andrei, who was sitting in a child's chair, frowning as with trembling hands he poured drops from a medicine bottle into a wine glass half full of water. "What is it?" he asked angrily, and his shaking hand accidentally let too many drops fall into the glass. He splashed the mixture out onto the floor and asked for more water. The maid brought it to him. Besides the child's crib and the little chair on which Prince Andrei was sitting, there were 2 chests, 2 armchairs, a table, and a child's table in the room. The curtains were drawn, and a single candle was burning on the table, screened by a bond volume of music so that no light might fall on the crib. "My dear," said Princess Maya, turning to her brother from beside the crib, where she was standing, "better wait a little. Later." "Oh, will you please? You don't know what you're talking about. You always want to put things off. Now you see what comes of it," said Prince Andrei in an exasperated whisper, with the manifest intention of wounding his sister. "My dear, really, it would be better not to wake him." "Now that he's fallen asleep," said Princess Maya in an imploring voice. Prince Andrei got up and went on tiptoe to the crib, wine glass in hand. "Do you really think we shouldn't wake him?" he asked uncertainly. "Just as you wish. But really, I do think so." "But as you wish," said Princess Maya, clearly intimidated and abashed that her opinion had prevailed. She drew her brother's attention to the maid, who was calling him in a whisper. It was the second night that both of them had gone without sleep, watching over the baby, who had a high fever. Lacking confidence in their household doctor and expecting another who had been sent for from town, they had spent these last days trying first one remedy and then another. Worn out by sleeplessness and apprehension, they vented their anxiety on each other, finding fault and quarreling. "Petrushka is here with papers from your father," whispered the maid. Prince Andrei went out. "What is it now?" he muttered angrily, and after listening to the verbal instructions sent by his father, he took the correspondence and his father's letter and returned to the nursery. "Well?" he asked. "Still the same. But wait. For heaven's sake, Karl Ivanitch always says that sleep is more important than anything," whispered Princess Maya with a sigh. Prince Andrei went to the child and felt him. He was burning hot. "You and your Karl Ivanitch." He took the glass with the medicine and went up to the crib again. "Andrei, don't!" said Princess Maya. He scowled at her, and his face had a rancorous yet anguished expression as he bent over the child with the glass in his hand. "But I wish it," he said. "Come, I beg you, give it to him." Prince Maya shrugged her shoulders, but obediently took the glass, and, calling the nurse, began giving the child the medicine. The baby screamed and wheezed. Prince Andrei winced, and, clutching his head, went out and sat on a sofa in the next room. He still had the letters in his hand. Opening them mechanically, he began reading. The old prince, now and then using abbreviations, wrote on blue paper in his large, elongated hand as follows: "Have just this moment received by special messenger very joyous news. Unless it is false, Benison seems to have won a complete victory over Bonaparte at Eylau. In Petersburg all are jubilant. Countless awards sent to army. Albeit a German, I congratulate him. Can't make out what commander in Korchevo, one Kanadrov, is up to. So far, additional men and provisions have not arrived. Galloped over at once and tell him I'll have his head if all are not here within week. Have received another letter about Prussia's Eylau battle from Petenka. He took part in it. It's all true. When meddlers stay out of it, even a German can beat Bonaparte. They say he is fleeing in great disorder. Get over to Korchevo and see to things without delay." Prince Andrei sighed and broke the seal of another envelope. The letter was two closely written sheets from Bilibin. He folded it up without reading it and reread his father's letter, ending with the words, "Get over to Korchevo and see to things without delay." "No, you must forgive me, but I will not leave till the child's better," he thought, going to the door and looking into the nursery. Prince Meyer was still standing by the crib, gently rocking the baby. "And what was the other disagreeable news he wrote?" Prince Andrei mused, recalling his father's letter. "Yes, we have won a victory over Bonaparte, just when I'm not with the army. Yes, he's always twitting me. Oh well, let him." And he commenced reading Bilibin's letter, which was written in French. He read without understanding half of it, read simply to escape, if only for a moment, from thoughts he had been dwelling on so long, so painfully, and to the exclusion of everything else. Chapter 9. Bilibin was now at Army headquarters in a diplomatic capacity, and though he wrote in French, employing French jest and French turns of speech, his unabashed self-censure and self-mockery in describing the whole campaign were patently Russian. Bilibin wrote that the obligation of diplomatic discretion was a torture to him, and that he was happy to have in Prince Andrei a trustworthy correspondent, to whom he could pour out all the spleen that had been accumulating in him at the sight of what was going on in the army. The letter was dated some time back, before the Battle of Prussisch Eylau. "Since our brilliant success at Austerlitz," wrote Bilibin, "as you know, my dear Prince, I never leave headquarters. I have acquired a decided taste for war, and it is lucky for me that I have. What I have seen during the last 3 months is beyond belief. I will begin ab ovo. As you are aware, the enemy of the human race is attacking the Prussians. The Prussians are our only faithful allies, having betrayed us only 3 times in 3 years. We take up their cause, but it turns out that the enemy of the human race pays not the slightest heed to our fine speeches, and in his ill-mannered, uncivilized way falls upon the Prussians without giving them time to finish the parade they have begun, and in a trice gives them a sound drubbing and installs himself in the palace at Potsdam. My greatest desire," writes the King of Prussia to Bonaparte, "is that your Majesty should be received and treated in my palace in a manner agreeable to your majesty. And to this end I have hastened to take all steps that circumstances allow. I only hope that I have succeeded. The Prussian generals pride themselves on their politeness to the French, and lay down their arms at the first demand. The head of the garrison at Gloku, with 10,000 men, asks the King of Prussia what he is to do if called upon to surrender. All this is absolutely true. In short, hoping to inspire awe solely by means of a warlike attitude, it turns out that we have landed ourselves in a war in earnest, and what is more, on our own frontier with and for the little King of Prussia. All is in perfect readiness. Only one little item is lacking: a commander-in-chief. Since it now appears that our success at Austerlitz might have been more decisive had the commander-in-chief not been so young. All our octogenarians have been reviewed, and between Prozorowski and Kaminsky, the latter has been chosen. The general comes to us in a covered cart, a la sauvage, and is received with acclamations of joy and triumph. On the 4th, the first courier arrived from Petersburg. The mail pouches are taken to the field marshal's room, for he likes to do everything himself. I am called in to help sort the letters and take those meant for us. The field marshal looks on, waiting for the envelopes addressed to him. We search. There are none. The field marshal grows impatient, sets to work himself, and finds letters from the Emperor to Count T, Prince V, and others. Then he flies into one of his towering rages, fumes and rants at everyone, seizes the letters, opens them, and reads those written by the Emperor to others. Aha! So this is how they treat me. No confidence in me. Aha! Ordered to keep an eye on me, are they? Very well then. Get out, all of you. And he writes the famous order of the day to General Benison. I am wounded and unable to ride a horse, consequently cannot command the army. You have brought your army corps to Pultusk, routed. Here it is, exposed, and without fuel or forage, so something must be done. And as you yourself reported to Count Buxhowden yesterday, you must think of retreating to our frontier. Proceed to do so today. And to the Emperor he writes, all my expeditions on horseback have given me a saddle sore, which, on top of all my previous dressings, quite prevents my sitting a horse and commanding so dispersed an army. And I have therefore handed over said command to the general next in seniority, Count Buxhowden, sending him my entire staff and the appurtenances thereto, advising him, if he is short of bread, to retreat into the interior of Prussia, as there is only 1 day's ration of bread left, and some regiments have none at all. According to reports from division commanders Osterman and Sedmorovsky, and all that the peasants has been eaten. I myself shall remain in the hospital at Ostrolinka till I recover. In most humbling submitting my report, I would further add that if the army remains in its present bivouac another 2 weeks, there will not be a healthy man left by spring. Grant leave to an old man who is anyhow disgraced by his inability to fulfill the great and glorious destiny for which he was chosen, to retire to the country. I shall await your most gracious permission here in the hospital, that I may not have to play the part of a clerk instead of a commander in the army. My removal will produce not the slightest stir. A blind man quits the army. Russia has thousands such as I. The field marshal, angry with the emperor, punishes us all. Quite logical. Thus ends the first act. Those that follow are, of course, increasingly interesting and ludicrous. After the field marshal's departure, it appears that we are within sight of the enemy and must give battle. Buxhowden is commander-in-chief by seniority, but General Benison does not see it that way, especially as it is he and his corps who are in sight of the enemy. And he wants to profit by the opportunity to fight a battle on his own hand, as the Germans say. He fights it. This is the Battle of Pultusk, which is considered a great victory, but to my mind was nothing of the sort. We civilians, as you know, have a very nasty way of deciding whether a battle is won or lost. The side that retreats after a battle has lost it, is what we say. According to this, we lost the Battle of Pultusk. In short, we retreat after the battle, but we send a courier to Petersburg with news of a victory, and General Benison, hoping to receive from Petersburg the rank of commander-in-chief as a reward for his victory, does not relinquish the command to Buxhowden. During this interregnum, we embark on an exceedingly original and interesting series of maneuvers. Our aim is no longer, as it ought to be, to invade or to attack the enemy, but solely to invade General Buxhowden, who by right of seniority should be our chief. So rigorously do we pursue this aim that after crossing an unfordable river, we even burn the bridges to keep clear of our enemy, who for the moment is not Bonaparte but Buxhowden. General Buxhowden pursues us. We give him the slip. No sooner does he cross to our side of the river than we cross back again. Finally, our enemy Buxhowden catches us and attacks. Both generals lose their tempers. There is even a challenge to a duel on Buxhowden's part, and an epileptic fit on Benison's. But at the critical moment, the courier who took the news of our victory at Pultusk to Petersburg returns bringing our appointment to commander-in-chief, and our first foe, Buxhowden, is vanquished. We can now turn our attention to the second, Bonaparte. But at this juncture, what should happen but that a third enemy confront us? Our orthodox soldiery clamoring for bread, meat, rusk, fodder, and what's more, I don't know. The stores are empty, the roads impassable. They start looting, and in a way of which our last campaign can give you no idea. Half the regiments form bands and overrun the country, putting everything to fire and sword. The inhabitants are totally ruined, the hospitals overflowing with sick, and famine is rampant. Twice the marauders even attacked headquarters, and the commander-in-chief had to ask for a battalion to drive them off. During one of these attacks, my empty trunk and dressing gown were carried off. The emperor proposes to authorize all division commanders to shoot the marauders. But I very much fear this. But I very much fear that this will compel one half the army to shoot the other. At first, Prince Andrei read with his eyes only. But after a while, in spite of himself, and though he knew how much faith to put in Bilibin, what he read began to interest him more and more. Having read thus far, he crumpled the letter and threw it away. It was not what he read that vexed him, but that the life out there, a life in which he now had no part, could perturb him. He shut his eyes, rubbed his forehead as if trying to expel all interest in what he had been reading, and listened to what was going on in the nursery. Suddenly he thought he heard a strange sound through the door. Panic seized him. He was afraid of something might have happened to the child while he was reading the letter. He went on tiptoe to the nursery door and opened it. The moment he entered, he noticed that the nurse, who looked scared, was hiding something from him, and that Princess Marya was no longer beside the crib. "My dear," he heard what seemed to him her despairing whisper behind him. As often happens after sleepless nights and prolonged anxiety, he was seized by an unreasoning dread. It occurred to him that the child was dead. All that he saw and heard seemed to confirm his fears. "It is all over," he thought, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Beside himself, he went to the crib, certain that he would find it empty, that the nurse had been hiding the dead baby. He drew the curtains aside, and for some time his distracted, unseeing eyes could not find the baby. At last he saw him. The flushed little boy had tossed about till he laid across the bed, his head lower than the pillow, smacking his lips in his sleep and breathing evenly. Prince Andrei, seeing the child like that, rejoiced as if he had been lost and restored to him. He bent over him and tried with his lips, as his sister had taught him, whether he was still feverish. The delicate forehead was moist. He put his hand on the little head. Even the hair was wet, so profusely had the child perspired. Not only was he not dead, but was every indication that the crisis had passed and he was recovering. Prince Andrei longed to snatch up this helpless little creature, to squeeze and press him to his heart, but he dared not do so. He stood over him, gazing at his head and his little arms and legs outlined beneath the blanket. He heard a rustle beside him, and a shadow fell under the canopy of the crib. He did not look around, but, still watching the infant's face, listened to his regular breathing. The dark shadow was Prince Marya, who had come up to the crib with soundless steps, lifted the curtains, and let them fall behind her. Prince Andrei recognized her without looking round, and held out his hand to her. She pressed it. "He is in a perspiration," said Prince Andrei. "I was coming to tell you so." The baby faintly stirred in his sleep, smiled, and rubbed his forehead against the pillow. Prince Andrei looked at his sister. In the dim shadow of the canopy, her luminous eyes shone more brilliantly than usual, filled as they were with tears of joy. She leaned over to her brother and kissed him, slightly catching the curtains of the crib. Each made the other a warning sign and stood still in the dim light beneath the canopy, as if unwilling to leave that seclusion where they three were alone, shut off from all the world. Prince Andrei was the first to move away, ruffling his hair against the curtains. "Yes, this is the one thing left me now. This is the one thing left for me now," he said with a sigh. And I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you for watching, and I hope you keep watching. Please give it a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down. Leave a comment below. Subscribe if you like, or like I say, do nothing. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.